I'm going to say good morning. How's your day going aside from having to do press today?
You know, I love every morning because I start with walking my daughter to school.
Sure.
And it's one of those, moments that brings me so much joy having a like one-on-one conversation with my 9-year-old every morning. It's like just like a great start to the day.
Gotcha. Well, question in a different direction, if you don't mind,
Of
which
course.
is for most people, being a chief surgeon and or having their own practice, that's the end of the rainbow. In your case, there's a book, there's TikTok success, there's entrepreneurial success, etc. From day one, did you know that you wanted to just have more than your own practice?
You know, I always felt like I had the ability to do more. But
Hmm.
when you're in training, that is your life. And you have to make that your life in order to become, the top at where you want to go so that patients are safe, so that you're able to perform these, high pressure, surgeries. So for me, I always knew I would have this very focused part of my life where orthopedic surgery is the priority. It was more of a priority than hanging out with my family, my friends. I missed all the weddings. I missed all, the birthdays, the going out.
Sure.
But that's part of the sacrifice that we make as surgeons. And then I feel like a lot of surgeons get to a point in their life and career where we're more comfortable with what we're doing. We now have years of experience. And I feel like there is a window where we start to think, what else could I do with the skills that are beyond just being a surgeon?
And here you are. Now, how long did the book take to actually put together? Obviously, a lifetime of stories, but sitting down to write a book when you're already busy is one thing, promoting it is another thing. So, how long was it from going, I want to write a book to actually finishing it?
So I would say start to finish was 2 years. My TikTok channel came first. So I started my TikTok channel with, I'm always of the opinion that everyone has one great Netflix worthy story about their life.
Yeah.
And for me, that was the story of my first day of work. And, I'm an orthopedic surgery resident. I've worked my whole life for this. I matched at Lenox Hill Hospital, like one of the premier hospitals in the world, and it's July 4th weekend, right? It's the weekend where everybody starts new. Everybody knows that everybody is fresh and everyone is new. And on that day, when I started on night float, my middle brother ended up in a terrible accident, and he, in essence, became my first patient. So I knew I always wanted to tell that story. I actually asked him permission to tell that story before I posted it on TikTok.
Hmm.
And that was my, really my first story to go viral. So after I had tremendous success with sharing all of these crazy ER stories, these, wild stories from my training, I was approached by first a ghostwriter, and then I met with a couple of literary agents, and they said, "You're a storyteller. You don't need a ghostwriter." So I ended up writing the book myself over the course of 9 months, and yeah, now here we are.
And then the entrepreneurial stuff that you do outside of the authoring, the TikTok, how are you able to get all that done? Is there a team behind Dr. Nance?
So I would say I'm very good at compartmentalizing,
Hmm.
and each day is kind of, I would say, I bracket for different things. So Wednesdays are my sacred patient day. Okay,
Hmm.
I don't do interviews. I don't do Zoom calls. That is just for seeing patients. Then on Mondays may be my content creation day, right? I spend all day
Hmm.
cranking out, content that I'm going to then do for the rest of the time. And then I like to do kind of Thursdays, Fridays, work more on the app. But for me, all of the projects are synergistic, right? They all, like, I wouldn't be hosting a podcast about medical detectives if I wasn't already the expert on certain medical conditions,
Right.
right? So for me, I think they all build on one another, and that's why they're able to be integrated into my life so seamlessly.
So the TikTok success, that intrigues me because, and hear me out for a second, I find that there's social media success and then there's TikTok success, totally unrelated to everything else. I can post a video that quickly gets thousands of views on YouTube, and my total view count on TikTok will be 18 views. Had you tried other social media before landing on TikTok, or what was it that made you realize that TikTok was a good fit for you?
So I actually worked with a company called Hook Point, and they taught me how to reverse engineer viral videos. So every video that I make, I'm not guessing how it's going to perform. I know how it's going to perform. And I know because I've done the research as to like what are the topics that people want to hear about.
Hmm.
And I think this is a tip for anyone who's interested in starting on social media is that when we say you have to know your audience, right?
Hmm.
It's not about what you have to say, it's about what they want to hear. And
Hmm.
so for you, you may have success on YouTube because that audience is more interested in the format that you're using versus
Hmm.
TikTok. We know that there are structures. For example, why are there so many videos of people videotaping themselves in their car? Right? Because that's a signal that someone's about to tell something like really intimate, right?
Yes.
Why are there so many videos of people walking on the street talking? Because what they have, that's a signal. What they have to say is so important, they couldn't even wait to slow down. They just have to tell you, right? So there are structures. And what I found is that for, I do a lot of medical content, right? But there are structures that work for other fields that I can then apply my expertise and my knowledge, but to a structure that I know is going to work. And that's how my videos really took off.
Well, if you can take a compliment here, it's interesting when somebody's able to be successful on TikTok and YouTube because TikTok, you kind of have to have the person's interest within 2 seconds or they scroll away. A podcast, if somebody's really into you, they're going to not only check it out every week, but actually listen 45 minutes, 90 minutes, etc. So I think you've cracked the code in short form and long form.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I do note that they are for different audiences, right? I know that what I do on TikTok does not necessarily equate to when I'm doing a medical detectives podcast. And for example, when I'm hosting the medical detectives, it's all about letting the patient guest shine, right?
Yeah.
I am doing everything to make them feel comfortable. I am trying to back them up with medical facts to make them, kind of again try to make their story shine through, whereas I'm kind of like the supporting character versus on TikTok all of my content is just me doing these selfie videos where I'm the one, but they're kind of the same because I'm really more the messenger, right?
Yeah.
I'm still telling other people's stories and I'm talking about other people's experience, but I can do it in a way that maybe is more approachable and more engaging than most people are having conversations with their everyday doctor.
Hmm, interesting there. So, putting my perspective on things even further, projecting even further in you, Dr. Nance, when I turned in my last book, months before it was coming out, the publisher was going, okay, what's your next one? For you, Little Misdiagnosed, it's still a new book to everybody. Are you thinking about another one, or are you kind of one and done with all that?
Well, what's interesting is that Little Misdiagnosed is my memoir, right? These are my personal stories, ones that, I had shared a lot online, but half of them are completely new, right?
Hmm.
Stories that people have never heard of. As my kind of social media presence grew, I was just inundated with, I would say, 10,000 messages a week from people asking me to share
And
their stories,
I need to
right?
interrupt you there.
Yeah. Yeah,
10,000 a week.
correct.
That's,
Over 10,000 a week messages of people wanting me to share their story so that
yeah.
one person wouldn't have to go through what they went through. And after, kind of synthesizing all of these messages and talking, to all of these different patients, what I kind of came up with is this framework called the 7 stages of misdiagnosis. And I actually gave a TED talk on this last month, so it's probably going to be on TED channel in a couple of weeks. But that's my probably the after Little Misdiagnosed, the focus will be on kind of talking about this emotional framework for how people handle misdiagnosis.
So long term, it sounds like you do hope to do more speaking engagements, more live shows, possibly a tour of being able to discuss these kinds of things.
I mean, I would love that because, I would say primarily my audience is for, generally women with chronic illness, but really anyone who's ever had just a really kind of crummy experience with healthcare and the healthcare system.
Sure.
And this is a group of people who've never been categorized together, and no one has ever really spoken to them as a group. And I feel like the hardest part in all of this is people feel so alone when
Hmm.
they're going through a misdiagnosis. And the crazy part is there's probably millions of people who are suffering with the same problem.
Hmm.
But because of the nature of medicine being very siloed, and the difficulty it is to actually get an accurate diagnosis, we have so much more in common with each other than we even realize.
Wow. Well, two quick questions for you, and then I let you go. And they have nothing to do with Little Misdiagnosed. We'll keep saying that name so the algorithm picks it up. And the first one is, you mentioned at the beginning of the interview, walks with your daughter, and then we mentioned the 25 different jobs and careers that you have all going on successfully at the moment. But what's your number one form of decompression or letting things go or relaxing? Is there such a thing for you?
I love watching reality TV. Always have. I am a big Bravo fan. Summer House is one of my favorites. And even when I was in medical school, my husband he got me a subscription to Us Weekly. And it was funny when I, was doing all these interviews to write the book, the different publishing houses would interview me and ask me, like, who's your favorite author? And I would say, like, does Us Weekly count? Because when you spend all your time in such an intense environment, reading medical journals, trying to stay up to date, you need a space to just veg out. And I recommend for people who are in when you're in your phase where you are really intense writing your books or researching your guests for your podcast, right?
Sure.
You need a space and a time to just relax. So whatever it is, no judgment for what anyone else thinks is a way to veg out. But for me, it's reality television.
I appreciate anyone who does the highbrow and the lowbrow, which you do. Okay. The last thing for you, you've worked with Mount Sinai, which has a lot of presence here on Long Island. Have you ever been to this here town, Long Beach, New York? Has work ever taken you out here?
So never for work, but I grew up in West Hempstead on Long Island.
Oh,
And so I'm very familiar with all the towns. I mean, Long Beach, what a great beach town. We were just discussing with my family, actually, they have a tremendous swim team. We were talking kind of about like how we had these rivalries between the swim club that I grew up with and Long Beach. But yeah, Long Island has a very rich history of different like hospitals and medical care. Now there's a lot of consolidation in the industry, just like every other industry, right? Where now NYU is taking over hospitals and Mount Sinai is taking over hospitals, and it's like a brand thing. But there are phenomenal doctors really in all parts of the country, but I find in Long Island in particular.
Dr. Nance, thank you for your time. Looking forward to whatever's coming next, whether it's a podcast, a supplement, a TikTok video, or just good advice and goodwill in general. Thank you for being you all these years.
Thank you so much, Darren, for having me.
Paltrocast.